Hello, welcome to section 1.2, solving multi-step equations. So our objective for this lesson is to be able to solve multi-step equation using our inverse operations. Okay, so we're actually going to look at probably a slightly new way of solving these using a method called mapping. Okay, so we're going to do these two different ways. Just some people really like the mapping for some problems. If you like it, go with it. It doesn't work for all problems. Okay, so we're looking at this equation here. 2x minus 3 equals 15. So to use mapping, I'm going to start with finding my x, and I'm going to ask myself, I'm going to start with an x here, so let's look, I'm going to write an x, and I'm going to ask myself, what do I do to this x first? Well, first I want to multiply it. There's this multiply by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw an arrow over, and I'm going to be like, okay, so first I'm going to multiply times by 2, and I get something out. I have no idea what I get out because I don't know what x is, but I'll take whatever x is, multiply it by 2. And then after I'm done multiplying by the 2, then we want to subtract 3. That's what I would do next using order of operations. So I take whatever I have there in that box, and I would subtract 3 from it. And then I get now here my final answer, which we know our final here should be 15. So I know inside this box needs to be a 15. So this is basically mapping through and working through the problem. I start with x, multiply it by 2, get something out. Multiply it by negative 3, get something else out, and get out a 15, I guess. So now how mapping goes is we basically want to work this problem backwards. So I want to get from this box to this box. Well, to go forward, I subtracted 3. So to go backwards, I have to do the opposite of subtract 3, which would be add 3. So I take my 15 and add 3. So when I add 3 to 15, I get 18. So I know this box had to have had an 18 in it. For me to have had that 18, subtract the 3. Okay, so now that I'm done adding 3, now I look, well, to get from here back to where I started the x, to go this direction, we multiplied by 2, so to go backwards, we're going to have to divide by 2. So I take my 18, divide by 2, and I end up with a 9. So that told me that I started with an x of 9 to end up at the end here, so I had to start out at a 9 to multiply by 2. To subtract 3 and end up with 15. Okay, so what this is really showing us is when solving equations with more than one operation, meaning there's a multiply in this problem and there's also a subtract in this problem, we have to undo it in a backwards fashion. So instead of doing multiply first, we have to do subtract first. Okay, so how this would look without mapping, we'd start with our equation over here, 2x minus 3 equals 15. The first thing I'm going to have to undo is the subtract 3. So to do that, I would need to add 3 to both sides. So I would leave a space, and now I would add 3 to both sides. Okay, so now we'd simplify. So here, my subtract 3 and my add 3 here simplify to 0. So now I'm going to have 2x equals 15 plus 3 is 18. If you notice, we had that same step. That 18 did show up over here in the mapping. And then now at this point, I would undo the multiply by dividing both sides by 2. So x is 9. Okay. Again, we got the same solution. X equals 9, x equals 9. Okay, but what changed is really the work that we showed. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to do another one. Oh, it says check your solution. So we want to make sure that it worked. So when I put a 9 back in here, 2 times 9 is 18, subtract 3. Oh, we didn't want to do that. 2 times 9 is 18, subtract 3 is 15. So it did work. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we'll do this one both ways as well. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do this one both ways as well, just to kind of get us used to that process. So here I start with my x again. The first thing I do to my x in this problem is multiply by 2.5. So we would multiply by 2.5, multiply by, I don't like using the x for multiply by, so let's get rid of that. Multiply by, put it in parentheses, 2.5, and we get something out. Okay. And then after that, we would subtract the 13, and we end up with a 2. Okay. So now let's go backwards. Instead of subtracting 13, we're going to add 13. 13 plus 2 is going to give us the 15. And then I'll need to now divide it by 2.5. Okay, I don't know about you, but I don't know what 15 divided by 2.5 is, so that's going to be a calculator one just for time right now, and we get 6. So x was 6. Okay. To do this one without mapping, okay, first thing I need to undo is the subtract 13. Minus 13, so we're going to add 13 to both sides, equals 2 plus 13. These add to 0, so I'm left with 2.5x equals 5. Wait. Oh, 13. 15. I was missing the 1 on there, so we're adding 13 to both sides, not 3. And then divide both sides by the 2.5. And we end up with x equals 6 again. Circle it. We want to double check it, make sure it works. So I'm going to use my calculator here, which I don't have one up here, so I'm going to go ahead and we need to take the 2.5, I'm using Desmos, times 6, subtract 13, and I do in fact get 2. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's do another one. We're not going to do this one mapping. Mapping doesn't necessarily work for all types of problems. So here we want to solve. We have negative 12 equals 9x minus 6x plus 15. We know for a lot of us, we like our x's on the opposite side, so I'm going to write this down. I'm going to flip-flop it. Plus 15 equals negative 12. So I just moved this right side of the equation, moved it over here, and then moved the negative 12 over. Okay, so if you can simplify a side in an equation, do that first. If you notice on this side, both of these have x's. Since they are like terms, I can subtract them. 9x minus 6x is 3x. Simplify first. It makes life easier. Okay, now at this point, I'm going to subtract. We want to get rid of the add 15, so I'm going to subtract 15 to both sides. So plus 15 minus 15 equals negative 12. Negative 12 minus 15. So these are going to add to 0, so I'm going to have 3x. Negative 12 minus 15 is negative 27. Divide both sides by 3. X then is equal to negative 9. So now I'm going to, let's see, can I do this? Yep, sure can. So now I'm going to double check it. So I'm going to take 9. My x is, what do we say? Negative 9 times negative 9 minus 6 times negative 9 plus 15. And we do get negative 12. So it did end up working. Okay. All right. Next problem. Okay, so example. So here we want to solve. We have 2. Since there's nothing written in between this 2 and this parenthesis, we're assuming that it's a multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and put a dot in there. So you have 2 times 1 minus x plus 3 equals negative 8. There's 2 different ways you can do this problem. Okay, you could distribute it, or you could undo without distributing. I'm going to go ahead and look at both ways. You choose which way you prefer. I'm going to go ahead and distribute this 2 in. So we'd have 2 times 1 is 2 minus 2x plus 3 equals negative 8. Now on this side I can simplify. Both of these are whole numbers, so I'm going to put them together. 2 plus 3 is 5 minus 2x equals negative 8. Now be careful, this negative is actually attached onto the 2, so I'm going to write that as plus a negative 2. So here I have a positive 5, so I would subtract 5 from both sides. Okay, so this positive 5 and this negative 5 are going to add to 0, so I have negative 2x equals negative 13. Divide both sides by negative 2. X equals negative by negative is positive 13 halves. Leave it as 13 halves. There's no reason to change it to a decimal. Simplify the fraction if you can. So we end up with 13 halves. Now we want to check it and make sure it works. So we would go ahead and plug it in. Okay. So 2 parentheses 1 minus 13 halves. I can just type that in as a divide. Again, that's just a division, 13 halves. Okay, and then we're going to add 3. And we do end up getting negative 8. It did work. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to show you another way of doing the same problem. Let's see, purple. Okay, one is to not do the distributing first. Undo it as I've got 2 times something plus 3, so I'm going to subtract 3 to both sides. So we're just going to leave this as is. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So this plus 3 minus 3 give me 0. 2 times 1 minus x equals negative 8 minus 3 is what? Negative 11. And then here, so now I'm not going to distribute. I have 2 times something, so I'm going to get rid of the multiply by 2 by dividing both sides by 2. 1 minus x equals negative 11 halves. Now to get rid of this plus 1 over here, because this is a positive 1, I'm subtract 1 from both sides. Okay. So this plus 1 and this minus 1 are going to undo each other. So I'm just left with negative x. Okay. So now we have negative 11 halves minus 1. 1 is the same as 2 halves, common denominator. So negative 11 halves minus 2 halves is negative 13 halves. And negative x equals negative 13 halves, so positive x equals positive 13 halves. Another way of thinking about it is divide both sides by the negative 1. We get positive 13 halves. Same solution, 2 different ways of getting there. Okay. Never mind. There's me room to do it twice. Oh, I didn't realize I did that. Sorry. Same problem. I just have room to do it twice. So there, I did the first 2 methods on there on the first side. Okay. So now we want to write down our practice. Okay. So you are going to be doing on page 16. Sorry, pull it up. On page 16, you are going to do 2 through 14 even, 18 through 24 even, 38, and then 57 through 65. When you do all work on a separate piece of notebook paper, when finished, you will correct it with the answer key that I will provide you, or it will be through Schoology. Highlighting the ones you get correct, figure out the